Well, hello and welcome to my studio. My name is Jane and I'm a textile artist based in the middle of Scotland. I run a business that is called Snapdragon Life and an online creativity club that is called the Studio Club. And today I'm going to just take you through my first experience of dyeing with fungi, which isn't something that I've ever done before. And the reason that I'm doing it is that over this summer, I am trying to create a collection of embroidery threads to sell. So I've been gradually using plants from the garden or from the meadow that surrounds here, and I have been dyeing threads with them and then wrapping them onto these little wooden bobbins, and I am hoping to make up a beautiful set of different colours which I will be able to sell in October. Now obviously there's not going to be very many of them, but I just think it's a lovely project to do, kind of from my landscape going out into the world for people to make things with. So today I'm going to show you what I'm doing with this fungi. So last week, my friend Kat sent me a message to ask me whether I would like to come to her house for a coffee and to pick this up. Now this is fungi. It is called Dyers mazegill, and it is one of the traditional fungi for dyeing. Isn't it beautiful? It's lovely. It's a bract fungi, so it will grow on trees, but it is a parasite, so it is kind of like killing the tree. And then once the tree's dead, it grows all around. It tends to be growing underneath conifers, so pines, that kind of thing. So yes, I went along to Kat's and I picked it up, and now I'm going to dye with it. So it is a fungi that's not edible, so it is really just used for traditional dyeing. Now, first thing that I need to do is to weigh it. Let's get these actually on. Okay. Now that is 110 grams. So even though, writing it down because otherwise I will forget by the time I've stopped talking, even though it's a big fungi, it doesn't really weigh that much. But I think it has actually dried out quite a lot. So I'm going to be generous when I put things into dye with it. But if I'm going to use 1:1, that would only be 100 grams of wool that I could dye with this. So you can see how, if you were scaling this up, and this is why I'm always been a little bit wary of using fungi, because there have been so many examples of things becoming extinct in Scotland because natural traditional processes were kind of scaled up to factory level and so on. However, this is one of many mazegill fungi in the woods. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to chop it up into quite small pieces, and this is to really let the water get to them. It's like I don't know what it's like. It's like cutting up an old sponge or old insulation. You know, it is very, I'm not going to waste any, it's very, very spongy. The smaller I get these pieces, the easier it will be for the water to get right into the sponginess. We are right at the end, just cut that up. There we are. These bits look like brownies or something like that, right? Now, Dyers mazegill, it will give really lovely oranges and kind of mustards, olive greens and dark brown. But to get that wide range of colours, you can't overheat it, because if you start boiling it, it just goes really, really muddy, dark brown. So today, the only thing that I'm going to do is to pour boiling water over it, like this. Make sure that it is well covered in the pan. Okay, sugar it about a bit, put the lid on, and then I'm going to cover it with this. So it's going nowhere near a stove today. It is just going to be snuggled up like that. And then tomorrow I will come back and see how much liquid, so how much dye we've got in that liquid. And I'll start to play around with heating it very gently. So we're saying night night to this. Right, it's day 2. I'm going to unwrap my pan and check what kind of dye levels we've got. So look at that. That's a really nice kind of warm orange dye in there. But I think we can probably get an awful lot more out of the fibre, because look how dark, kind of spongy they are. So I'm going to just put the pan onto my stove and heat it up to sort of, I would say, hand hot temperature. You know, that kind of temperature where you wouldn't want to keep your hands in it for very long, but it's not actually simmering or boiling or anything like that, because we don't want it to boil. If it boils, it will go brown. So unless I want just brown, I want it to keep below simmer point and kind of like at that hand hot stage. So I'm going to bring it up, then I'm going to turn off the stove. I'm going to wrap it back up in my fabric so that the cooling is quite slow. And after that, fingers crossed, we'll be ready to dye. Normally, I would spend time kind of straining out dye matter, because you don't want to get little bits of leaves and so on into your threads, because they're quite difficult to get out. But with this, I think, you know, it's not kind of disintegrating at all. And this lets you see how much dye I think there is still left in that. But I'm going to do my dyeing of the threads, and then I can decide what to do. Right, so I'll pop them over there, dry my hands. Now, what I'm dyeing today is these threads. They are all wool silk threads, and these are the ones that I am going to sell. So I need to have 25, which is the run that I'm doing at the moment. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you can see I've got them in reusable plastic loop things here, like cable ties, but they're reusable. You can take them off and put them back. And this just keeps the loops nice and neat, so that there's less chance of me getting these all in a tangle. Right. So I'll put the first 10 in. Look at how much colour there is already. So I'm just going to very gently pop those in and then get the next 10. Now these threads have all been mordanted with aluminium potassium sulfate, and they've then been rinsed, and I have kept them damp, so that is how all of the dye is going to go in nice and evenly. So I'll pop those in, and then the last ones. 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so there. Smooth them out and pop them in. And that fills up the entire pan. So each of these threads is 3 grams, and there's 25 of them, so that's 75 grams. And if you remember, the fungi was 110 grams. So these should dye really nicely because it's more than a 1-to-1. 25 times 3, 75, and this is 110. So it should have enough dye in the pan to really give a good colour. You can see even at this very early point, it's giving a nice colour. So I'm going to very gently heat this back up to hand hot. I don't want to be simmering it, I don't want to be boiling it, I don't want to be moving any of the threads around. Just want to bring it up to a nice warm temperature, and then once again I'll put the lid on and I'll put my wrapping on, and it can cool down really, really gently. So I'll keep an eye on it, but otherwise I'll see you for the next bit. So I dried out that skein that you saw, and I have wound it onto one of my wooden bobbins because then I can see how it's going to fit into the set of threads, if indeed it is. So I've got the 2 nearest colours. This one is Tagetes, French marigold, and this one is Sulphur Cosmos. You can see they're quite far apart. And this one, when we put the Dyers mazegill in the middle, you can see it's actually a really nice kind of gradation between the 3. So I think it is definitely going to make it into the thread sets. What I need to do now, put all my lovely threads on their bobbins away and take all of the skeins out of the pan and begin the process of rinsing and drying them. So to start with, I am just going to pop them into here, let them all relax a little bit and start the process of taking that dye out. I'll go now rinse them in the sink. But there still looks as though there is quite a lot of dye in these. So I'm just going to pop these all straight back into the pan and see whether I can get any more out of them. So I'm just going to pop that in there, turn the heat on, put the lid back. Now this time I'm going to heat it up a little bit higher. If you remember, I just took it up to hand hot to get those yellows. I'm going to take it up to a very low simmer and see what happens next. But now I'm going to go and rinse these. Yesterday, you might remember that I got this beautiful kind of caramel colour from the mazegill, and that when it was all wrapped up onto the spiel, it actually gave me a really nice range of colours. So then I decided, if you remember, I would simmer that dye pan, and I expected it to give me something that was browner, duller, darker. This morning, when I came in, look what I got. Absolutely glorious golden yellow. So if you compare it to the one where we just kept it nice and warm but didn't boil it, it has gone brighter rather than duller, which was what I was expecting and what all of the books suggested would happen. So one of the things that I love about natural dyeing is that there are so many surprises along the way. But I have my suspicion that this, once it's dried, might be too near this, which is the French marigold colour. But I'm going to go and rinse this, I'm going to dry it, and then I'll make a decision about what I do with the rest of the skeins in this pot, because I can modify them with iron maybe to give us a different colour, that sort of thing. So I'll pop the lid back on there and I will put that go and rinse and dry it. And now on my stove, I have those original fungi, which still have, look how much dye is still coming out of these. You obviously don't need very many of them. I have put some washing soda into this. I've put 10 grams of washing soda into my pan, so this is now alkali. And I'm going to see what difference that makes to the dye that is coming out of the fungi. And then tomorrow I will neutralize that and I will dye some more skeins in it, see what kind of colors that we'll get. But first, I'm off to rinse and dry this. I'm going to return that to the pan, yeah? Squish it down until it gets wet. Because what I did was I took a tiny piece of the yellow thread and I push it with iron. And it looks to me as though we will get a good green. So that's what I'm going to do with bright yellow thread, is I'm going to turn it green with iron. Now this is normally something I would do outside because I am paranoid about getting iron all over everything, because with naturally dyed fabrics and yarn and thread, getting even a small amount of iron can change the colour. I'm just going to be really, really careful, and I'm going to swab down the table afterwards. So this is my iron. This is ferrous sulfate, and I'm going to put in just a couple of teaspoons, which is quite fine, since I'm rather reaching the end here. And I'll stir it round. And this just gives me a kind of a rusty water. And pop this up. Make myself a little tray. All of the iron things up this away. What iron does is it's a thing called satinin, and it changes the colour of natural dyes. It tends to dull them, deepen them. It's the way of getting khakis and dark greys and things, depending on what you start with. So we're starting with a very golden yellow, which is why I'm hoping that gradually it will go green. So first of all, I'm taking all of the dye out of there and just dropping them into the iron. I don't want to touch the iron. I don't want to do anything with the iron. I want to stay well away. And the transformation will take anything from 15 minutes to half an hour, maybe a little bit longer. I might have to put more iron in if it doesn't start going. But I'm going to do these in sets of 8, maybe. You don't want to leave the thread in the iron too long. You don't want to leave it in overnight. You certainly wouldn't want to heat it, because that can damage the fibers. So it's all a very gentle kind of way of doing it. Lots of these have got tied up in the pan. So you might be able to see that my way of doing natural dyeing is really slow and gentle way. I like to take my time. We're now on day 4 of this. I find that the slower a colour comes out, the more colour fast it will be, the better the colour will be, the more light fast it will be. It's when you really rush that you often don't get as good results. So I just like take it really slowly, using as little heat as possible and just letting the whole thing go itself. Now, already I can see that these are changing colour. Look how fast that is. So I'm probably just going to do 6 at a time. Let them kind of change colour, and then I will take them out, wash them, and dry them. And so I'm sorry, we've got this storm has come out outside. You might see that I've had to put the studio light on again. It's suddenly really, really dark. This is August. It's quite ridiculous. Right, so I'm going to now take these out of here. This is another reason that these little, what do you call them? Cable ties, reusable cable ties are really useful. And a little plastic tray, and pop them on. And you can see how different the colour is. Take it out here. Let as much of the liquid fall back into my eye thing. You see I have iron, if I can touch here, as part of my attempt to not get anything cross-contaminated. This is a really pretty green. Difference. See, from bright, bright yellow to a lovely olive green. Right. I think I'm going to switch the video off. I'll go and do all of this. I'll probably take them outside to rinse them and dry them, and then I'll show you what we get. I remember that I had put alkali into the pan here to see whether that changed the colour. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to strain some of that out into this bowl, check the pH, move the pH back to neutral, and see how we get on. So the first thing to see is that it is so much more orangey. Right, I think that's probably enough. Oops. I've also spilt it all over my dye table. Right. So hopefully I'm using this glass bowl so you can see quite how dark it is in comparison to yesterday's dye. What a mess. Right, so let's check the pH. So pH, it was 12 when I put it into the pan. So that's really dark down here. Put one of the things in. It's not really changing at all. It's sort of up here on that 7. So that suggests that the fungi itself is really acidic. So that putting in the alkali and cooking it with the fungi, they've kind of like balanced each other out. And we've got, you know, it's not even changing the colour of the pH paper much. So I'm quite happy to put my wool in here. And I have a sample skein here that has been mordanted in aluminium potassium sulfate, which is alum, and then rinsed, and it's now damp. So I'm going to pop it in here. You can see there's a lot of dye in this space. So what I'll do now is I will get a clean pan. I will pour that in, and then I will simmer it along with the threads that I'm wanting to dye for about half an hour. And when I say simmer, I mean just under simmer, not boiling, just under that simmering point. So I will pop it on here and turn the heat on. Right, I can take the cover off and see what these threads look like. And oh my goodness, what a gorgeous colour. You can see them. I'll take them here. And it's like a kind of a beautiful, warm conker brown. Look at that. Now it's interesting, when I started this process, I was just looking for a couple of threads to fit into my thread set. But now that I'm seeing quite how beautiful these ones are, I'm wondering about doing like a subset, a different set, a kind of a fungi thing of just 4 or 5 colours that have all come from this one fungi, this Dyers mazegill. I'll dry these ones off, have a look at the colour, and then make that decision. But look at that. It is now Thursday morning and I've edited most of that video, and now I need to kind of make a decision to round it all up. I've dried and wound all of the threads. I did another one because it's really important to have a light thread when you're making up a set. But I think that it's going to be a special edition kind of autumn fungi kind of set. I'm hoping to have 6 threads in it. I've still got to work on getting one more colour. But if not, it will be 5. I'm going to get all of the dyeing done by the end of next week, I think. And then they've got to cure and I'll be all wound up and packaged. I'm aiming for the end of the first week in October as a launch date. What I would say is if you're at all interested in these, sign up for the newsletter because I will launch it to newsletter people first. But these are the colours. So I have from very light, bright. And the thing that I love about them is that they are the colours of autumn. So this is the colour of the way that the grass dries out in the fields. And this is the colour of kind of bracken goes and the dock leaves. And there is a plant called gorse or whin, which is the only plant that flowers right the way through the year, really. And it is this bright yellow. And then you've got the sort of olive colours of all of the conifers and the shadows and everything. And then just this beautiful caramel colour, which is a really Scottish kind of hills, heathery colour. So they all go with that kind of autumn season thing. And the fact that they are all coming from one dye plant, the Dyers mazegill, is, I just find it amazing, amazing. So watch this space. They are going to be a limited edition. And I hope that you've enjoyed watching this and watching me try and work with new material, new dye stuff, and trying things, changing tack a bit, but always it comes back to the colour, and it comes back to the slowness, and it comes back to creativity, I think. Anyway, that's me for another week, and I'll see you next Friday. And until then, have a lovely week. Bye bye.